Hey, how you guys doing? So, we're going to do a little podcast on dust. People don't think dust is important, but this video or podcast is called Dust Matters. And if you hang out for the whole thing, you will look at dust completely different. I mean, dust kills millions of people every year on this planet. Millions of people, 4 to 5 million people die from dust related deaths a year. That's kind of like the Holocaust, except this happens every single year. So, why don't we just get going here? I'm not going to have any pictures or anything. So, you know, if your house is located near a bus station, okay, I'm going to give you some examples. You may have more skin fragments or insect fragments or even byproducts from combustion than maybe the house farther down the street. You know, the skin fragments might blow into your home. And of course, they'll be eaten up by dust mites, especially if you have humidity issues. And then they'll excrete thousands of fecal pellets, that can become airborne. And these fecal pellets and dust mite fragments become airborne. And as you walk by compressing the carpet with foot traffic or just simply vacuuming the carpet, then you increase the humidity by a moist crawl space or cooking pasta, or you have a humidifier on your furnace. Now you created a dust mite farm, and all of a sudden you could have asthma. So one house might have a dust mite farm, okay? Another house might have a mold farm, a dust mold farm. The house next door would have radioactive radon gas. Every home on this planet has an indoor air dust fingerprint. It's kind of like a DNA. No home will have the identical dust. Everyone's home dust is different. And you need to control and figure out what you're breathing. These particles need to be controlled, and we need to manage them, especially when they become intense. Even like when you go to a hospital in a surgery room, there's dust in the surgery room, but it's managed. Okay, they have filtration, and not all dust is bad, or it's not all poisonous, especially when you have smaller amounts. Some dust is toxic when it enters our bodies, just in minimal quantities, which I'll explain a little bit later. For this reason, we need to be educated about how dust enters our homes and how our homes create dust and how dust comes from other places into our homes. Once we figure this out, we then need to take steps to control it and mitigate it and take other necessary steps to clean so we live in a healthy environment. Like I said, 5 to 6 million people die every year from dust. That's a lot of people. We breathe dust all day, starting in the morning when we walk our dog in front of our yard. Later, we read the newspaper, and we'll be sitting on our dusty cloth furniture. When you sit on the furniture, you pick up a plume, so you're getting even more when you sit. Later on in the afternoon, we'll do chores like vacuuming. That'll disturb dust, lift dust into our breathable air. Now, that's very important. Breathable air is where, for adults, might be 4 or 5 feet, where our mouth is, where our nose is. As we walk with children and toddlers, it's less, 1 to 3 feet. So it's very important where we breathe, in what zone, and how much dust is in that zone. And so with children and toddlers, maybe you don't want to put them on carpets as you walk by the carpets. I'll explain a little bit later. Pets also get sick. People don't think about your dogs and cats, and you're walking by, with your dirty shoes and you're kicking up dust from your carpets. They're breathing that. So when you walk by your pet and kid, toddler, and you have a dusty wood or carpeted floor, just the movement of foot traffic will kick up a plume of personal DNA house dust that will be inhaled. When you use your vacuum cleaner, and if it's not a high efficient energy particle, HEPA, okay, and by the way, when you have these vacuum cleaners, you have to have filters changed on. A lot of people don't change the filters. Some have pre-filters, post-filters. But these particles, a HEPA will pick up 95% of the dust. But you also create a dust storm just by moving that vacuum cleaner around. And if you don't have a HEPA, then the vacuum cleaner could actually be creating more dust. And I've done many home evaluations with a aggressive particle profiling. I have a particle counter, and I'll always go up to the vacuum cleaners and I'll find out how bad these vacuum cleaners are. A lot of times people sneeze after, vacuuming their home. A lot of times people get sick from vacuuming their home. Also, your HVAC system. When a furnace kicks on, turns off, when the cold air returns blow and the returns suck, and you've got closed doors, you can create all types of pressures, differential pressures, positive, negative pressures, and that stirs up the dust in your home. That's why it's important to have proper filtration on your heating systems, because that will help. And you've got all kind of dust on your bookshelves, doors, tables, and the minute you kick on your furnace or even a fan turns on or a whole house fan, people sneeze, cough, and wheeze. And that means you just stirred it up. Someone has calculated that the average human will breathe roughly 150,000 specks of dust every single minute. And that could be in a clean home, in a clean environment. Our bodies do have defense mechanisms to deal with dust. Our nose, throat, and trachea, which eject, filter, remove most of these dust particles. But some homes are much dirtier, okay? And if the home is dirtier, you're going to be breathing a lot more. And I don't mean working, sweeping your garage. That would just multiply it by hundreds of times. But dirtier homes could have 500 dust particles. Homes that have pets have more dust particles. Homes that have carpets have more dust particles. You want to minimize the dust particles in your home, and you want to minimize the dust particles that you breathe. At this rate, 500,000 dust particles every minute, your body might have a difficult time removing the dust, and bad things start to happen to our bodies. Another thing is just doing regular things like baking with flour or sanding plaster or wall or ripping out old carpets. Well, ripping out old carpets is probably the most dangerous thing you could do. And these particles can rise to millions of particles that you breathe every minute in the air. So at that rate, you should be wearing some type of respirator, some type of PPR. Later that day, you go out to get your mail, or you open a window, or you go to the garage, you get a screwdriver. Now, when you open that door to the outside, guess what? The exterior enters our homes. Now we're bringing in outside air, and we'll talk about what's in the air on the outside. That's pretty important. That air that enters the house could just be cosmic dust, from a comet that's fallen out of the sky. It could be combustible products from buses stopping in front of the bus stop in front of your house, or whatever else comes from the exterior. You could be downstream of a fast food burger joint, okay? All these dust particles intermingle in your house, and they modify your house DNA dust, and it contaminates it more. Dust kills millions of people every year, with over 1 million of these people just in China. 1 million people. And before this coronavirus, you saw the people in China wearing dust masks. They were wearing them for 10 years. Everybody wears a mask there without the corona. And they know that because it kills 1 million people in China a year, the bad, dirty dust. And, China does have 1.4 billion. So if let's just use 1%, just for estimate's sake, the world has 7 billion people at 1% of the population. That's 7 million people that die from dust alone. Hitler's Holocaust took 6 million lives during World War II. It sounds like the world has a dust Holocaust every year. This 1% I talk about, is the death rate, not the get sick rate. This 1% doesn't include tens of millions that die from asthma or lung diseases or other bodily ailments resulting from dust. Dust is the big deal, you know. If we did some probability and statistics, this actual number would be mammoth. It would almost be unbelievable. Dust that we breathe, like I said, is a big deal. Some of you are probably thinking China's dust is dirtier because it has more people. They like to burn coal. They have careless industry emission standards. You know, and like I said, it's no secret that people in China wear dust masks or respirators because they know the air is dirty. What people don't understand is that this polluted air also travels in the jet streams and the atmosphere. So depositing China's polluted air all over the world. And I'm just using China, you know, as just an example here. So some people think like if you live in the west coast of America, let's say Washington State, it's clean and healthy because it's located near the ocean. You know, this might be a bad assumption because people who live in Washington are breathing salty air from the Pacific Ocean. They're breathing bunker fuel from ships and diesel fuel from ship tracks in the Pacific Ocean. You can see all the ship tracks and how many ships travel back and forth. Well, that's all polluted air. And the air does move to the west coast from the ocean. A lot of this air comes from China and Japan and the whole Eastern Bloc. So, you know, if you live in Washington, you should pay particular attention to what's happening on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. And I'll give you a pretty crazy example here in a second. Okay, in 2011, in Fukushima, which is a small town, 3 nuclear reactors melted, and they created a plume of radioactive cesium-134, radioactive cesium-138, and radioactive iodine-101. Well, these are low-temperature isotopes of the uranium, and they have half-lives. And, you know, the half-lives are, some are 9 days, some are 30 days, some are the 38, 138, I believe, is 7 years. And that means in half-life it degenerates. So it's very powerful and very radioactive initially, before the first half-life. So this stuff fell out of the sky and basically rained these isotopes all over Washington and all over the Washington state homes. I'm just using a Washington example. It actually went across America and their yards. And just if you know anything about radiation, certain types of isotopes, low temperature meltdowns are going to produce these types of isotopes. And so that is an alpha particle, and that gets on your food and vegetables. So now all your food and vegetables have got this stuff, and for the whole summer, okay? Because it takes, 30 days for a half-life, 30 days. So after 12 months, it had 12 half-lives. But if you had the fallout and you went and picked this particular fallout that came over America, it was a plume, and it came between March 11, 2011 and March 25th. It was almost like 14 days. And on the West Coast, they got a lot more of it. So maybe you're not going to eat the food in your garden that summer because it's going to be radioactive. And when you eat it, it'll damage your body. So you live in Washington, you got to think of the air that's coming from Pacific Ocean, okay? And this is just one exposure, Millions of these types of things happen. These events happen in the world every day. You don't know. Nuclear reactor meltdowns are anomalies, that cannot be controlled or predicted. However, you can control the air in your home, and you can control the location of your home to minimize these potential sources that can intermingle with your body and the interior air that you breathe in your house. It's a known fact that certain cities where people live are dirtier than other cities and have much higher death rates. More polluted cities have higher rates of dust-related illnesses as well. We talked about that. Millions. Sometimes you just pick the wrong town to live in. I'll give you an example. And there's hundreds of examples. We're going to pick Libby, Montana, for example. Is one of these villages. Libby was a small town that had 2,500 people, and they were all exposed to a vermiculite mine that was opened in 1920. Well, vermiculite was mined by W.C. Grace between 1960 and 1990. Vermiculite is basically a rock that expands when heated, and once they process it, it becomes puffy. You know, they use it for insulation and many products. It's used in cement, gardening products, gas fireplaces. Like a lot of fireplaces have vermiculite on the bottoms, you know. Well, you got to know what year that vermiculite and where it came from. The stuff you buy today is okay. House insulation, fireproofing, and a lot of commercial products. A lot of the buildings were used with vermiculite as fireproofing. And so you'll be working at your office and you're going to be breathing this stuff. Well, the problem with Libby, Montana's vermiculite was they used this, they made insulation, and they insulated 33 million homes in America and Canada. And this was also during one of the first energy crisis. So a lot of people were wanting to insulate the home, and this happened to be one of the products. And so the problem occurred is when they found out that when they mined this insulation in the town of Libby, Montana, they hit a vein of tremolite. Now, tremolite is also a rock, but it's a rock that breaks down into such small particles that it damages your lungs. It's asbestos, okay? Tremolite, asbestos rock, was mixed in this product. So if you think about it, 33 million homes have this in America and Canada. And so you start drilling holes in your ceiling, you better know what you're doing if you see this stuff come through. So check it out. I have some videos on this. But the product contained 40%. The problem was not only that it was asbestos, but the fibers contaminated this whole town of Libby, Montana. All the miners that lived in this town died, you know, from cancer, mesothelioma. A lot of people that weren't even miners in that town died and sick. It was a big Superfund site. And the government spent millions and millions of dollars. Another thing is all the train tracks that led to towns that the trains went through with this product had cluster zones of cancer. So, you know, if you live near the train tracks, think about it. You ever see a train go down and you see a plume following it? Well, everyone's breathing that. So, you know, people are worried about, hey, I bought a house near a train track. I got a good deal. You know, some vibration causes cracks in my foundation. But wait a minute. What's on that train? What's blowing off that train? Back in the late 40s, these trains had radioactive materials that they were sending to refineries to make uranium. And all the towns that these trains went through, they came from Canada. There's 4 other places, and these towns have high cluster zones. So living near train tracks, very careful, you know, because the dust that blows off the train cars. Anyways, so that was just one example, okay? So you always want to check the town that you're living in, and check for tracks, check for, you know, commercial or manufacturing establishments. You don't want to live near a building that used to be a lead smelter. So always do your homework where you're living at. You know, don't just look at the house, you know, look at the area around the house and how the area can affect the house. Okay? So now 30 years later, these kids that played on the streets of Libby, who were jumping up and down on the vermiculite piles, are all getting lung disorders now, getting sick and dying. So, you know, it's not just Libby, Montana, but other cities with mining operations. You know, it could be coal, stone, metal, and other things that come out of the earth. So, moving on, we have other contaminants, okay? In America, We have 100 dry lakes. We have ponds that dry up, okay? And when they dry up, they will be very dusty. So winds blow over these dry lakes. We have a lot of large lakes. So if you live downstream a dry lake, you could be breathing this particulate. It could be getting in your house. These particles of dust and sediments become airborne. There's Owens Lake as an example, which is approximately 110 miles square, was drained because they needed water for drinking and other needs. Now, every time the wind blows, it picks up approximately 400,000 tons of dust, okay, and disperses it into the air. And I'm not sure if that's per month or per year, but it picks up the dust and will continue to do that. This Owens Lake dust is so intense that people gave it a name. They call it the Keeler fog. And it actually travels hundreds of miles downstream, depositing particles from this lake onto people's properties and their homes. Then you got to look at other lakes. For example, here's one that's drying up, Lake Mead, which is near Vegas. And Lake Mead, they've used up the water because Lake Mead was actually a water reservoir for 4 states, and they're draining it. And several hundred feet of water depth has dropped. And so now, of course, we're going to get the dust from those areas. And so a lot of people, get soil from Lake Mead every time the wind blows. And it clogs up their air conditioners and causes illness. This airborne dust just doesn't stop at Vegas. And it goes to many other areas around Vegas. And also travels overhead. Particles then, they get up in the atmosphere and the sky and they collide with each other and cause friction. And this is kind of crazy, but friction in the sky caused by dust can cause static electricity. And some people are sensitized to it. So if you're in an area, a lot of people that are in areas where there's a lot of dust above, and it could, I'm going to give you a few more examples, but, the dried lakes is one of them, and desert is another. We'll talk about that. People have headaches and they can't figure out why they're having headaches. And here they're living in a static environment. And you could create static electricity in your home as well. And that's a whole nother topic. Dirty electricity and harmonics and EMFs and electromagnetic fields and all that. But yes, that will cause headaches. These dust clouds also can disrupt air traffic. Okay, many people still believe that JFK Jr. plane went down and malfunctioned because of dust. We have a lot of plane crashes throughout the world from dust plumes that float around, whether from volcanoes or sandstorms. In Kenya, a jet flew in the year 2000 into a sandstorm and killed everybody on the plane. And this doesn't happen all the time, but dust disrupts planes and causes millions and millions of dollars of jet engine damage. The world is full of deserts. So we talked about lakes and dried up lakes. Now we talk about deserts. Well, deserts also have a particular geological fingerprint. Some of the deserts are rich in calcium. Some are rich in phosphorus, okay? And they're all different. They all got a fingerprint. And basically, when the wind blows, it's going to pick up the dust. Now, a lot of the particles are large micron size, but some are very small. 0.1 micron is small. 0.3 micron is small. And so you'll have different sized particles. The larger the particle, they'll settle out quicker, but the other ones will travel. And it's estimated that 3 billion tons of desert dust get blown into our skies every year. And if you put this dust, these 3 billion tons of dust into a train, it'll go around the earth 6 times. Imagine that. So that's a lot of dust, okay, that's getting blown up. And so I don't know if I'm living downstream from a desert either, okay? And these sand clouds, when they get up into the atmosphere, a lot more things happen. And what happens when they get up the atmosphere, they actually float up there for a long time, and they start to reflect the sun. And we need the sun for, our vitamin. We need it for gardening, solar power. And also, the sun, without the sun, the earth is going to cool and we're going to have rising oceans and all kind of stuff. These giant dust clouds can also destroy rain and rain clouds, okay? And it can even take out a hurricane. And I'll explain that in a second. It happens all the time in the Atlantic Ocean. Some of these larger, huge deserts that are in China and Africa will hurl up 6 million tons of dust every year. So that would be the figures every year. 6 million tons every year. And the China dust will go way up the atmosphere in the jet stream. And basically, it'll disperse this dust for thousands of miles all over Canada and the United States. People in Washington breathe air from China, their desert. Okay, we talked about the people in Washington. We just picked that one earlier. Now we have another very known dust cloud. It's called the African Sahara dust. About 3 to 4 times a year, it picks up and travels east, and it goes over the ocean. Okay, and sometimes, like for example, this year in 2020, we had huge plumes that came over, and a lot of people in South America and in Florida get hit with this. So, and that you can actually follow this particular dust storm or this dust cloud. It basically spans the entire ocean. And it goes for weeks. And so you may want to see when this is happening, and maybe that's when you go to Ohio. And I posted on my Facebook about this for years. And we've had some really bad ones and you could actually track the size of the particles. 0.1 microns is what makes it across and so that is the dangerous, I call it cancer dust, because that gets down in the lungs. So you could check this out and look this up if you live down in Florida and check it out. Let's just say the plume's coming. Maybe on those days, and you live down in Florida, maybe on those days you don't open the windows. Maybe you change the filter in your HVAC system like every day, and you'll see how dirty it gets. Filters are very important, okay? And especially in areas where you have a lot of dust. Now, the earth this is crazy, but the earth can gather more than 100 tons of space dust will drop on this earth every day. This space travels through space at like 150,000 miles per hour. And once these particles hit the atmosphere, they accelerate, because of the gravity. And some get burned up and some collide, some make bigger particles, and they smash down on the ground into the ocean. And this is what increases the Earth's size. People think the Earth gets bigger, on its own. No, it's these little particles that keep dropping from all other parts of the galaxy. So that's how this Earth gets bigger. It's from space dust. And of course, we breathe some of this, right? It's estimated that every human on this planet will breathe, I don't know who comes up with this, but 4 specks of space dust per day. Now, I don't know if space dust is bad, but, this dust comes from asteroids, comets, exploding stars, much more. The galaxy has millions and millions of stars and comets and asteroids. Space doesn't end, right? And some of it comes from the sun. The sun has spots that produce solar winds. You could watch the solar winds on certain websites daily and watch their wrath. Most of the time, solar winds are minimal on this planet. But sometimes, if you watch them in their sites, the solar winds can speed up and cause all kind of problems. When this happens in certain areas, especially if, let's say, your country is facing the sun, and the sun happens to have its spot, and you happen to have an open space in the ozone, you will get hit with this, or the whole country will get hit with it. And so these particles, they're so small, they're very minimal, but they can screw up the Earth's magnetic fields. Okay. Now, what happens is when there is solar winds, which is basically dust coming from the sun, it causes magnetic issues within our bodies. Our bodies have magnetic systems, and it does affect certain sensitized people. And it can make people crazy when this happens. Like, you ever see when school kids get a little bit nuts when there's a full moon? Well, it's kind of the same thing. And I remember last year, 2 years ago, I watched the solar winds, and I saw that on a Friday, I saw that they were going to hit the U.S. on a Monday in 3 days. And for just giggles, I put on my Facebook, I said, hey, Monday, things are going to get crazy in the U.S., and, people are going to get nuts. Be careful with traffic and road rage and things like that. Well, Monday came around, and it was crazy. And that was also the day that we had 2 school shootings. So I'm not saying it was because of that, but solar wind dust does affect people. And of course, some of this dust gets into the oceans, and the fish, the bottom feeders, get it, eat it, and gets into storm sewers and ends up on our kitchen table sometimes, with the fish. Well, in conclusion, these particles are probably minimal compared to what I'm going to talk about. But, they could be anything from micro diamonds to sapphires to radioactive elements. Okay? And you could watch this stuff if you'd like. On solar wind days, maybe we just keep our windows closed. All right? We don't go outside at night and look at the moon or whenever it's happening. We are making a stretch of this, so we'll move on. We also have particles now. Not just from space, but particles that come from the center of the Earth. And, when dust comes from the center of the Earth, it usually comes in the form of boiling rain or superheated ash, speeding down a mountainside, okay? Molten rock, There are many volcanoes, active and inactive throughout the world. You probably don't want to live, near a volcano that has erupted, because you're going to be breathing that dust for years and years and years. You might want to think about, a volcano that's active downstream. Dormant volcanoes also contribute to dust, in the lower atmosphere. Active volcanoes add dust to the upper atmosphere in the ozone. And some of this dust will float around in the upper atmosphere for 10 years, okay? So it doesn't go away. And again, that's reflecting the sun. The areas around the Pacific Ocean, they call it the Ring of Fire. And there's a lot of volcanoes, a lot of active volcanoes, not active ones. And, if you live near a volcano or downstream volcano, you can be breathing these tiny dust crystals. Now, these dust crystals are sharp, they're small, and they're not good for you. They'll get in your lungs. And, we talked about how many million people die of dust every year and how many more millions get sick of it. Well, people living around volcanoes or breathe crystals from volcanoes are very prone to this. Volcanic dust causes all types of illnesses, lung disorders. All right. So whenever, you have an erupting volcano, we're talking tens of millions of tons of sulfur, dioxide, and other particulates go into the air. In 1991, Mount Pinatubo, sent a 1 mile cubed cloud, dust 22 miles into the air, into the troposphere and the stratosphere and the ozone. People who lived near this got sick, and got sick later also, not to mention their cars got sandblasted. People can get sick many, many years after a volcano eruption. If you have a volcano eruption and they clean up the town, it's not over. That dust is going to linger for years and years. It's going to be in your house, and you're going to be breathing it, and they're sharp, and they'll damage your lungs. And in some larger volcanoes, we're talking hundreds of miles. Okay, hundreds of miles as far as the diameter or the radius. And of course, not to mention, it's going to plug up your air filters of your cars and air conditioners, Okay, you're gonna be cleaning dust all the time. You'll clean it one day and it'll be back the next day. You know, keeping windows and doors closed and running filtration devices. Changing filters is going to be a nuisance, especially in an area like that. Maybe just not live near a volcano. Okay. One massive volcano, such as Pinatubo, I don't know if I'm saying that right, can fill a train of volcanic dust. Okay, that one we were just talking about, and the train of dust can run from the length of New York City to San Francisco. So you could just imagine how much dust that one volcano can do. Now, this dust I mentioned earlier causes damage to jet engines, millions of dollars. But it floats up there for a long time, screws up planes. We talked about plane accidents. Okay, but it also reflects the sun. We talked about that too. Now, what's kind of crazy is we have a few people, I believe Bill Gates, has many patents, and other corporations have patents that want to mimic volcano eruptions. So they're going to want to send sulfuric acid into the ozone, and they call it solar management. They're probably doing it now, okay? And solar management just basically means they want to reflect the sun back into space to hamper or slow down global warming. And this is stuff, geoengineering, atmospheric conditioning, solar reflection, cloud generation, weather modification. This is going on. This is going on big time throughout the world. And I'm not sure it's such a good idea. I mean, they really don't know what these long-term effects are of this type of solar management, what's going to do to the Earth and what's going to do to us. Okay. So, regardless if these upper elevations up in the skies, dust that come slowly dropping down that come from volcanoes or from Sahara dust or from dry lakes or salt from the oceans, and others, these specks of dust end up in our yards and in our homes. And again, adding to that fingerprint. Many dust generators exist that contribute to low indoor air in our homes. Okay, they come from odor causing asthma. I don't know if I'm reading this right. This is a notes that I'm reading, and obviously it's a work in progress. But so there's a lot of dust generators, okay, and that bring stuff in our home, whether they're odors or dust generators, but they all contribute to illness. Okay, now I was driving on a freeway between Arizona and Mexico, okay, on a borderline, and odor was so putrid that I actually had to put a respirator on, which I happen to have. And this odor would be very intensive every 50 or 60 miles. And odor is particulate, okay? And you breathe it. So just because, it smells bad, it's also probably not good for you. What was happening in this particular area, and I would never live near Arizona and Mexico border because of this, or other parts of California, because hog farmers aerosolize their byproducts, okay? And you're not going to find this on the internet. They will not put this on the internet, but this is what they do. These hog farmers have these big lakes of urine and feces and whatever else they dump into them. And then at night, they pump them into the sky and aerosolize it. And then they let it rain, and especially on windy days. So if you live near a farm like this, okay, a hog farm in the West Coast, and they actually do it at Lake Mead because I was there, and I'll never forget because I go around the country for photography of abandonment, and I went to Lake Mead, and the place was closed down, the whole place, except there was 3 hotels, and we rented a hotel. And when I got up in the morning, it stunk so bad, I almost puked. I mean, it was that bad. And I asked the worker, I'm like, "What's going on?" He goes, "Oh yeah, you get used to it. You get used to it." I go, "How do you get used to aerosolized urine from hogs?" Well, guess what? People are breathing this stuff. Thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of people live and breathe this stuff, and that's not good for you. That makes you sick as well. So that was an example of hog farmers spraying urine into the sky, ending up in people's homes, and some people call it drift. Drift can happen in other locations. The Carolinas have the same problem. The Carolinas have 10 million hogs, and that's all over the internet because people are really mad about that. And again, that is the stench. So odor is also contaminant that affects our homes. And maybe maybe we don't live near a hog farm or a farm. Period. Thousands of homes get contaminated with this hog stench. Okay, and people have been fighting this, and it's kind of tough. It's tough to fight big business. It's easier just to move and find a safer place to live. Okay, and there's all kind of class action lawsuits, and you know what? Who's got time for that? You're only on this planet for so long. You might as well, breathe good air if you can. And we're not talking just hogs. Beef, chicken farms also cause issues downstream. Okay, and then of course we have agriculture. These guys. You live in near farms and stuff. And I know that I go to the Amish auction all the time. And I know that when I like to drive through the country, but in the spring and early summer, I drive with the window open, but I put a mask on, and and I don't put the mask on because Corona. I put it on because the dust coming off the fields, and they're spraying fertilizers, okay? And they're spraying whatever else they spray, and you're getting the drift. And any person living out in the country, downstream of a farm, you're going to have their dust. You're going to have their chemicals. I know EPA tries to control all that, but you know what? A lot of farmers and people in farm areas have cancer and are sick. And they're not going to tell you what caused it. But I know one thing: that's dust. That's open land, dry land. The wind blows, not rocket science, okay? Maybe we don't live near farms, okay? And, they've got fungicides, mildicides, pesticides, and they drift, and sometimes they use airplanes. They fly over your house and they're dumping stuff and they stop it, but you're still getting the drift and it's getting stuck into your house. And so these particles do manage to enter into homes nearby, okay? And a lot of these dust particles are carcinogenic. So towns near farms will undoubtedly have increased dust levels during the peak seasons. During off seasons, the dust may be lower, but they say that by increasing dust levels by 10 micrograms per meter cubed in the air, just by increasing them in a city, can increase the death rate by 1%. So the dirtier the town, the dirtier the city, the higher potential for becoming sick from the dust. And this stuff, blocks your lungs. It hurts your respiratory system, cognitive heart failure, coronary artery disease, and a lot more. I'm not a doctor, but a lot of, these kids have asthma today. 20-30% of all kids have asthma. Okay, a lot of that could be due to pets indoors and carpets and dust mites and fecal pellets and that plume I was talking about earlier, because kids' lungs grow, they're younger, and so dust is not a good thing. Okay, it can trigger bronchitis, chronic coughing, asthma, decreased lung capacity. People that live in retirement facilities should never be located near dusty areas or dusty cities. Generally, people that are over 65 are the hardest hit when it comes to dirty air. Now, let's think about that. We're talking about dust now, and it says, it hurts people that are older because they're more susceptible to it. Well, this new virus is doing the same thing. What does this new virus do? It affects the upper pulmonary, your lungs, and so that's why a lot of older people are getting ill from this coronavirus. It's about the lungs, and here they're talking about the dust causes the same thing. So maybe we don't put mom and dad in an old age home near a construction site, or near a mining area or near a farm, because we don't want them to breathe dust. Okay. As people get older, their immune systems become less compromised and their dust filtering capabilities become lesser. Nurseries and schools, daycares also should not be near these areas. Just dust generators, any kind of dust generator will hurt young children, okay, more than the adults, okay. Generally, the young children, they have developing bodies. They need more air. They breathe more, okay. And so this could be a big reason why we're having asthma issues, okay. Not to mention, a lot of these dust generators create and disperse toxic chemicals, which causes whole other issues. When dust gets in our homes, and this would be an example when it gets in the carpets, okay, if you got a carpet in your house and it's an older carpet and you put a toddler on the carpet, you walk over the carpet and you create a plume of dust. And it's like it was 500,000 to a million particles are in the air, and that little child breathes that. You don't see it, because you're up at 4 feet. Your breathing zone's at 4 to 5 feet. The toddler's at 0 to 1 foot. The baby's at 0 to 1 foot. The dog's at 1 to 2, and it's noxious, and it's causing these kids to be sick. And that gets amplified if you have moisture in the house or high humidity and pets. Now we got dust mites and we got fecal pellets. Okay. So a lot of this dust that gets into our bodies, okay, first gets caught in our nose. And a lot of times the nose will stay up there until it drips out or we blow it out in a hanky. Some of it will escape the nose and find its way into the nasal cavities. And that'll stick, it'll stick to the walls and come out as mucus, all right? But some particles will get down, way down deep in the trachea and stick to the walls. And these are the small particles, the 0.1 microns we've been talking about. These are the Sahara cloud dust 0.1s. These are the tremolites we talked about earlier, 0.1s. The smaller particles. And they get down into the lungs and cause major health problems. Now, we talked about the particles, we talked about the odors, all these bad things. So let's talk a little bit about smoke. A lot of the smoke that we breathe does not get filtered out, okay, in our mucus defense system. It goes down deep into our lungs, okay? And if you live in areas, and here we'll give you an example this year, in last couple of years, let's say California. Well, the California had droughts, okay? And droughts dry things out. And then if you have drought, you have dust, then you have dust, then you have static electricity. If you have static electricity, you have lightning. If you have heat lightning, you have fires, right? So now you got fires. And then the fires burn wood. Incomplete combustion is what that is, because it's not pure combustion. So you create all types of aldehydes and all these toxins. And so now you're breathing fire smoke. So that is causing a lot of people to be sick. And you're going to see so many throat issues and throat cancers and upper respiratory problems in areas of fire, especially in California. And they probably won't give you statistics on that. A lot of people are leaving it. So leaving California, I'm not saying leave California, but I know that on my Facebook many times I said the drought's coming. Get out. You're gonna have fires. And you go to my Facebook. I said this stuff months before the fires, because you could see these droughts from NASA's satellites. You can look all this stuff up. So maybe we stay away from places that have fires. A lot of times these fires are controlled too. Okay, park systems will do it. So check out, before you move into a new area, if you're moving to a town, check out the fire maps. They do have fire maps. They have statistical data, okay? And look to see where you have higher potential for fire, okay? I'm getting some chat, and I can't read the chat because it's too small. I apologize, but I will go back and read it and answer your questions later when I'm done, okay? So thank you for the chat. So always check that out, okay? And you always want to worry about it. Another place you really want to worry about is airports. People don't think about that. Oh, I live near an airport. Well, the planes are flying over or the planes are landing. It doesn't matter. You don't want to live underneath the runway. So before you buy a house, find out where certain airports have a lot of runways, a lot of takeoffs, and a lot of landings. So you want to see where these areas are at. You want to see on the map, and maybe you don't buy a house where they land, because sometimes they dump fuel. And when they take off, they have incomplete combustion because they're trying to get up. So you're breathing carbon dioxide, you're breathing all kind of bad stuff. So maybe we don't live near runways or near an airport. We also have manufacturing, steel, rubber, power, plastic, textiles. You don't want to be near those. You want to limit your exposure. Find out where you want to, find out, where you're living, and look on a map, go on Google Earth and see what's around you, and then see which way the wind usually comes from the west. So see where you're living. Sometimes, you need to have protective clothing and air filtration. You want to have filters in your house, maybe some HEPA respirators in case you need them last minute. Like, I have them, so when I needed them, I always got them. But let's say you have a catastrophe that occurs. Everyone is going to be running to the store for them, and they're not going to have them. So always have those at your disposal. You can minimize the use of cellulose products, fabrics that collect dust, old carpets, okay? Maybe not live next to freeways. Maybe not live next to fast foods that cook, that they're barbecuing. That's not good. Barbecuing, you're breathing that. That's incomplete combustible products. The odors come in your house. Maybe don't live near the farms or mining areas or dried lakes. So there's a lot of things that we need to worry about with dust, and we need to be more cognizant of it. Dust is generated in your home. Dust is generated by humans. Dust comes in your home. And if you know all this and you're cognizant, you should have a HEPA filter in your car, just sitting there. And I'm not talking about that goofy face mask that everyone's running around for this coronavirus. I'm not talking about that one, and we're not going to get into that. But you should have a HEPA filter. Now, make sure if you do have, you want to know about the masks and that you buy. They're called P100s, N100s, and R100s. Now, let me just tell you the difference here. And N95s, R95s, and P9. 95 and 100 just means 95 picks up 95% of the particulate, 100 picks up all of it, and HEPA picks up a lot. So a 90, 100, the word 100 in HEPA means a lot of very small particles. 95, pretty close. N, if it starts with N, that means no oils. And guess what? Oils are put in everything because they want them to stick. So farmlands spray chemicals and they moldicides, herbicides, all have oil in them because they want it to stick. Well, N doesn't pick it up. So an N95 and an 100 do nothing for you, okay, if you're next to a farm field. Now, R means yes, it picks it up. The only problem with the R is it doesn't last as long. It's only good for 4 to 5 hours. You got to throw out, get another one. The P is the best. P100 or P95. Make sure you buy them. Get them now. I think you can still buy those. Those are the ones they say we can't buy because they're for health professionals. That's BS. Get yourself a P100, a couple of them. One in your house, one in your basement, one in your car. And you know what? Wearing masks is the new normal. It is. Just people wear goofy masks now all the time. This is not going away. It's not going away. Social distancing is not going away. So you might as well get a good masks. Now, if you want to put some stupid mask on and go to the store and get your peanut butter, fine. But if you're going to go sweep in your basement, man, you better be wearing a P100. If you're going to your garage, wear a P100. If you're driving through the country like I was, you know, and they're dispersing urine, aerosolizing urine at pig farms, put on your mask. Okay, if you're going to Lake Mead, you know, and you're sightseeing, put on your mask. Anyways, this is my dust part 1. Thanks for coming on. I'm going to probably do these all winter. I'm going to do electromagnetic fields. I'm going to do light bulbs. I'm sorry that I didn't give you guys a bunch of pictures. You like pictures, but it just takes a lot longer to do the pictures. So thanks for coming on. I will go to chat and answer all your questions. You guys have a nice evening.